My name is Brittany, I'm 32 years old, and at my 5th wedding anniversary dinner, my husband announced his 26-year-old secretary was 7 months pregnant with his child. Before I tell you how that calculated act of public humiliation led to his complete and utter ruin and my ultimate triumph, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. The champagne glass didn't shatter. I didn't throw it or drop it in some dramatic display of shock that would have given them the satisfaction they craved. It just slipped. Like the floor had dropped out from under my world, my hand simply forgot how to hold on. Like everything else in my life, it was slipping away in that single, crystal-clear moment of horror. My husband, Daniel, stood at the head of the table, tapping his fork against his glass, that easy, charming smile I'd once fallen for plastered on his handsome face. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Brittany and my 5th wedding anniversary," he began, his voice, rich and confident, carrying easily across the opulent private dining room of La Bernardine. The warm, golden light from the crystal chandeliers overhead caught the distinguished silver streaks at his temples, making him look every bit the successful, doting husband. Our families were there. My sister, Carmen, my parents. His mother, presiding over the table like a queen. Our closest friends, the people who had danced at our wedding. All their faces were turned toward us, beaming, expecting a toast filled with love and promises. His eyes, the same warm brown eyes that had promised me forever, found mine across the table. For a single, stupid heartbeat, I thought he was about to surprise me with something wonderful. A trip to Italy, a renewal of our vows, maybe even, and this was the most foolish hope of all, that he'd finally agreed to the adoption we'd discussed, the one he always seemed to find a reason to postpone. Something, anything, to bridge the silent, chilling distance that had been growing between us for the past year. Instead, his gaze deliberately shifted, moving past me to a corner of the room I hadn't paid any attention to. To Lydia. His secretary. 26 years old, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves and the kind of radiant, effortless glow my own body, exhausted and bruised from years of invasive fertility treatments, had long since forgotten. She was literally glowing. "Lydia is 7 months pregnant," Daniel announced, his voice unwavering, laced with a sickening pride. "And I'm the father." The silence that followed was a physical thing. It was so absolute, so heavy, it felt like it could crush bone. I could hear the soft jazz trio playing in the background, the distant clink of silverware from the main dining room, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears like a frantic war drum. Someone gasped. I think it was Carmen. My mother's fork clattered loudly against her china plate. But Daniel, my husband of 5 years, wasn't finished. He wasn't looking at Lydia anymore. He was looking directly at me, his expression not one of apology, but of cold, hard justification. "I'm sorry, Brittany, but we both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time. You can't give me what I need. What a man needs. A family." Then his mother, my mother-in-law, Mrs. Grant, leaned forward, her lips curled into a smirk of pure, unadulterated vindication. "Daniel's right, dear," she said, her voice cutting through the suffocating silence like shards of glass. "You've had 5 years. We can't keep waiting for a barren woman to give us grandchildren." Barren. The word wasn't just spoken, it was deployed. A weapon designed to wound, to humiliate, to annihilate. It hit me with the force of a physical blow, sucking the air from my lungs and leaving a ringing in my ears. Around the table, faces were a sickening blur of shock, pity, and a kind of hungry, morbid curiosity. They were waiting for the show. Waiting for the breakdown. For the tears, the screaming, the accusations. They wanted a scene. But it never came. Something deep inside me, some core of self-preservation I never knew I possessed, took over. My shaking hands stilled. My vision cleared. I slowly, deliberately, placed my linen napkin beside my untouched plate of sea bass. I stood up, my movements fluid and unnervingly calm. I smoothed the fabric of my silk dress, picked up my small clutch from the table, and walked toward the door. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step a measured, defiant beat in the crushing silence. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I simply walked away, my spine as straight as steel. As the heavy oak door swung shut behind me, sealing me off from the wreckage of my life, I heard two things that would be burned into my memory forever. Lydia's triumphant, tinkling little laugh, and Daniel's voice, filled with relief, saying, "Well, that went better than expected." He had no idea. He thought he had just ended our marriage. What he had actually done was declare a war he was not remotely prepared to lose. That night wasn't just the death of the woman I was. It was the birth of the woman I was about to become. The drive home was a surreal journey through a city that had suddenly become foreign. The familiar streets, the landmarks of our life together, were now just monuments to my own foolishness. There was the little Italian place where he'd proposed, the park where we'd walked our dog, the bookstore where he'd buy me poetry collections. Each memory was now tainted, a scene from a movie about someone else's life. My mind, a frantic projector, kept replaying the last 5 years, desperately searching for the red flags I'd so willingly painted white. I remembered the day we bought the house, our beautiful, sprawling Victorian on Birchwood Street. It was my dream home. I'd just received a huge promotion at the architecture firm, and my inheritance from my grandmother's estate had finally matured. Daniel had been so charmingly persuasive, wrapping his logic in a cloak of love and practicality. "Honey, your credit score is flawless, way better than mine," he'd said, kissing my forehead as we looked over the paperwork. "And since you're putting down the entire deposit from your inheritance, it just makes financial sense for the deed and the mortgage to be solely in your name. It's just cleaner for tax purposes, protects us both." He made it sound like he was doing me a favor. I was so blinded by love, so eager to build our perfect life, that I signed the papers without a second thought. It was a practical decision then. Now, driving through the cold October night, it felt like something else entirely. A premonition. A fortress. Then came the memories of the doctors. Year 4 was a blur of clinics, needles, and crushing disappointment. I remembered one specific afternoon with perfect, painful clarity. I was sitting in my car in the clinic parking lot, my stomach bloated and bruised from another round of hormone injections for an IUI that had, once again, failed. The physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my soul. I called Daniel, desperate to hear his voice, to feel some connection. He'd answered, his tone clipped and annoyed. "Britt, can this wait? I'm in the middle of a huge case, the partners are breathing down my neck." He complained about the cost, how my expensive hobby was eating into his potential salary bonus. A huge case. I now knew his huge case had a name, and it was Lydia. He was likely with her at that very moment, while I was injecting myself with false hope and blaming my own broken body. And his mother. Her visits were less like social calls and more like royal inspections. She'd sweep into my house, the house I paid for, her eyes scanning my flat stomach with poorly concealed disdain. Her comments were always sharp, always aimed to wound. "A promotion is nice, dear," she'd said after I'd been made senior partner, "but a man needs a legacy. The Grant inheritance isn't just money, it's a bloodline." I'd grit my teeth, smile politely, and offer her more tea, all the while feeling like I was failing at the one job that truly mattered to them. Even my best friend, Maya, my rock, had tried to warn me. Just last month, she'd cornered me over coffee, her eyes filled with a concern I refused to acknowledge. "Britt, are you happy?" she'd asked gently. "It's just. I saw Daniel at the courthouse last week with his secretary. They looked close. He had his hand on her back." I'd cut her off immediately, a cold defensiveness rising in my chest. "She was probably upset about a case, Maya. He's her boss. Don't be ridiculous." I defended him, made excuses, chose my comfortable lie over the terrifying truth. Now, pulling into the driveway of my house, the truth was all I had left. The house was dark, silent. I walked through the front door and the silence was a living entity. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was empty, mocking. The wedding portrait hanging above the fireplace seemed to laugh at me, a smiling, hopeful woman who had no idea the man standing beside her was a complete stranger. I stood in the grand foyer, still in my shimmering anniversary dress, and for one, single, solitary moment, I let the weight of it all crush me. My knees buckled. I slid down the cool, smooth wall until I was a crumpled heap on the marble floor. My body started to shake, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. A raw, silent scream clawed its way up my throat, but no sound came out. My chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. 5 years of my life, built on a foundation of lies. 7 months of his affair, a sordid timeline that overlapped perfectly with my most painful, hopeful rounds of fertility treatments. While I was injecting myself with hormones, charting my cycles, praying to a god I wasn't sure I believed in for a child, he was creating one with her. The wave of pain was so absolute, so annihilating, I thought it would drown me. I thought, this is it, this is where I break. But then, something else rose to the surface. It started as a low, hot burn in the pit of my stomach and spread through my veins like molten lava. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't grief. It was rage. Pure, clarifying, crystalline rage. It burned away the tears, steadied my shaking hands, and forged the shattered pieces of my heart into something hard and sharp. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the floor. It was Maya. I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone else. When she arrived 20 minutes later, she didn't find me in a puddle of tears. She found me standing in the kitchen, a glass of Daniel's most expensive celebratory wine in my hand. Brit. She started, her face a mask of gentle concern, ready to comfort a victim. He thought I would break, I said, my voice dangerously calm, a voice I didn't recognize as my own. He thought he could discard me in front of everyone we know, and I would just crumble. She stopped, studying my face, seeing the shift. You look angry. I am, I said, taking a slow sip of the wine. And I'm just getting started. The grief had been a flash flood. Now, the storm was just beginning. I looked over at Daniel's home office, the sunroom I'd lovingly converted for him, with its perfect lighting and custom-built shelves. His sanctuary of lies. He's arrogant, I said to Maya, who was watching me with a mixture of awe and trepidation. And arrogant men get sloppy. I walked into his office. The computer was sleeping, a soft, pulsing light on the tower. I tapped the spacebar. A password screen popped up. For a second, my heart sank. But then I thought about his monumental ego, his absolute certainty that sweet, trusting Brittany would never have the nerve to snoop. He used the same simple password for everything, a combination of his college nickname and his birth year. It was a joke between us how unsecure it was. I typed it in. The screen unlocked. My breath hitched in my throat. It was all there. A digital monument to his breathtaking betrayal. Email chains with Lydia stretching back over a year, filled with sickening pet names, my lion, my goddess, and detailed plans for their future together, a future that did not include me. There were photo albums on his cloud drive, neatly labeled. Aspen Getaway February, Napa Weekend April. Vacations he'd claimed were solo business trips to de-stress from high-profile cases. I saw them laughing, kissing, her hand resting on her still flat stomach in a picture from months ago. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. It was pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I felt like a surgeon, methodically excising a malignant tumor. I found a flash drive in his desk drawer, ironically, one I'd given him for his birthday, and started copying everything. Every email. Every photo. Every damning financial statement. I opened his banking folder and my blood ran cold. There were the receipts, a $5,000 diamond necklace from Tiffany's, a spa weekend at a 5-star resort, dinners at restaurants I'd always wanted to go to. All of it paid for from our joint savings account, an account funded almost entirely by my salary and annual bonuses. Then I found the file that sealed his fate. It was a PDF, innocuously labeled medical. I clicked it open. It was a positive pregnancy test result from a lab. Lydia's name was at the top. And the date was there, in black and white. It was 2 days before I had started my final, most expensive, and most emotionally devastating round of IVF. The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. I took a picture of the screen with my phone, my hand steady as a rock. "Maya," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Help me pack." We moved through the house like a pair of silent operatives on a mission. I didn't take everything. I didn't want to tip him off. Just the essentials. My clothes, my personal documents, my laptop. I carefully packed the jewelry my grandmother had left me, my inheritance, the one thing that was truly and completely mine. In his dresser, tucked under a pile of perfectly folded golf shirts, I found the actual Tiffany's box. Empty. And beneath it, a stack of love notes written in Lydia's loopy, juvenile handwriting. I photographed it all. As we loaded the last box into the trunk of my car, Maya looked back at the grand, sleeping house. "He has no idea what's coming, does he?" I looked at the beautiful Victorian facade, the home I had paid for, the sanctuary he had so casually defiled. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It felt like putting on armor. "None at all," I said. I drove away at 2 a.m, leaving behind 5 years of a hollow lie and taking with me the one thing that mattered more than anything else, the cold, hard, irrefutable truth. And I was going to use it to burn his meticulously crafted world to the ground. I woke up in my sister Carmen's guest room feeling a strange, unnerving sense of clarity. The morning light filtering through the unfamiliar curtains didn't feel disorienting, it felt like the first day of the rest of my life. My phone lay on the nightstand, showing a log of 37 missed calls and a barrage of texts from Daniel. I selected all and deleted them without reading a single word. The time for his explanations, his lies, his manipulations, was over. The processing was done. It was time to act. By 8 a.m., I was showered, dressed in my sharpest charcoal gray power suit, and sitting at Carmen's dining table. It was my new war room. My laptop was open, a fresh legal pad sat beside it, and the flash drive, my little silver bullet of truth, was plugged in and ready. My first call was not to a friend or a family member. It was to Margaret Winters. In our city, if you were going through a contentious, high-stakes divorce and you wanted to win, you didn't just get a lawyer, you got Margaret. She was a legend, a silver-haired shark in a Chanel suit who'd taken down politicians, celebrities, and CEOs without ever breaking a sweat. Her reputation was that she didn't just win cases, she annihilated opponents. Her assistant put me through immediately. "Mrs. Grant," Margaret's voice was as crisp and cool as a new $100 bill. "I heard about last night. The city is small, and news like that travels fast." The memory of the public humiliation sent a hot flush across my cheeks, but I kept my voice perfectly level. "Then you know why I'm calling. I have an opening at 2 this afternoon," she said, a hint of interest in her tone. "Bring everything you have." My next call was to my financial advisor, Sandra, a sharp woman who had managed my portfolio for years. "Sandra, it's Brittany Grant. I need a complete and immediate audit of all my accounts and assets. And I need you to freeze any pending transfers from the joint savings account. Something's happened." By noon, Sandra had emailed me a full breakdown. The numbers on the screen confirmed what the house deed had suggested. It was all there, in black and white. The house, deed solely in my name, mortgage payments automatically drafted from my personal account for 5 years, the substantial down payment made directly from my inheritance trust fund. The vacation cabin in the mountains, purchased entirely with my last promotion bonus. Our joint savings account, the one Daniel had access to, held over 90% of contributions from my salary. He had been living a life of absolute luxury on my dime, projecting an image of success that was largely funded by me, all while building a secret family behind my back. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it was almost impressive. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he had been systematically deceiving me financially for years. At 2 p.m. sharp, I sat across the vast, polished mahogany desk from Margaret Winters in her corner office that overlooked the entire city skyline. She was exactly as advertised, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and an aura of absolute, unshakable confidence. "Let's see what we're working with," she said, her tone all business. I didn't speak. I simply slid the silver flash drive across the desk. For the next 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft clicking of her mouse as she navigated the labyrinth of Daniel's deceit. I watched her expression, looking for a reaction. A flicker of surprise. A nod of approval. She remained impassive until she opened the financial records. Then, she paused. She leaned closer to the screen. Finally, she leaned back in her leather chair and a slow, predatory smile spread across her face. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Mrs. Grant," she said, and the way she said my name sent a shiver of vindication down my spine. "Your husband is not just an adulterer. He is a spectacular fool." She turned the large monitor toward me. "He's been using marital funds that we can prove you contributed, to finance this entire affair. The hotels, the gifts, the dinners for his pregnant girlfriend. In legal terms, that's called dissipation of marital assets. Courts do not look kindly on it." She clicked to another file. "And this is even better. He's been communicating with her, about the pregnancy, about your divorce, on company time, using company equipment. His law firm, Santiago, Katz & Associates, has a very strict, very public ethics clause in their partnership agreement regarding moral turpitude." She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. "This isn't just a divorce, my dear. This is a demolition. We have him on breach of fiduciary duty to the marriage, and his own firm has him on breach of contract." We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the strategy. It was swift, brutal, and precise. Margaret would file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and dissipation of assets, with a 50-page appendix of evidence that would make any judge's hair stand on end. We would demand full and immediate restitution for every dollar he had squandered, a generous spousal support arrangement based on the lifestyle he was accustomed to, a lifestyle I had funded, and a clean, surgical break that left me with every single asset I had brought into and acquired during the marriage. "What about his family money?" I asked, thinking of the Grant inheritance he was always so proud of, the one his mother guarded so fiercely. "Never commingled with marital assets," Margaret said without looking up from her notes. "His mother's influence, no doubt. She's a smart woman. But that works in our favor. He has no claim to your assets, and you have no claim to his. It's a clean cut. He is left with nothing but what he brought to this marriage, which, according to these records, was a mountain of student loan debt that you paid off." As I stood to leave, she gave me a long, searching look. "Are you sure you want to move this quickly? Some people prefer mediation, a quieter approach." I thought of Daniel's smug face as he'd announced his new family. I thought of his mother calling me Barren in front of my own parents. I thought of the 7 months I'd spent blaming myself, thinking I was the problem, while he was living a double life. "No mediation," I said, my voice like ice. "I want him served with the papers tomorrow morning. At his office. I want it to be as public as the humiliation he put me through." Margaret's smile returned, wider this time. "Consider it done." The next morning, at precisely 9:15 a.m., a professional process server walked into the gleaming marble lobby of Santiago, Katz & Associates. I know this because Margaret's private investigator sent me a photo, time-stamped. Daniel was standing by the artisanal espresso bar, laughing with a group of his colleagues, holding a cappuccino. The photo captured the exact moment the server said his name and handed him the thick manila envelope. It captured the tectonic shift on his face, from casual, arrogant amusement to utter confusion, then to dawning, abject horror as he read the words on the first page, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Cause, adultery. By 10 a.m., the desperate, unanswered calls had turned into a full-blown siege. He showed up at Carmen's house, pounding on the front door, shouting my name. Carmen, bless her, didn't even flinch. She called the police while I watched from an upstairs window as two calm, professional officers explained to my husband that I was not required to speak with him and that if he didn't leave the property, he would be arrested for trespassing. Brittany, he yelled as they escorted him back to his luxury car, the car I was paying for. This is insane. We can work this out. Think about what you're throwing away. The audacity was breathtaking. At 11 a.m., Margaret called with an update that was pure poetry. His law firm just contacted me, she said, practically purring with satisfaction. Apparently, Mr. Grant's very public personal drama is reflecting poorly on their very carefully curated professional reputation. The managing partners are concerned. They're strongly suggesting he might want to consider an indefinite leave of absence. The fallout was swift and merciless. Someone at the restaurant had live-tweeted the entire anniversary dinner fiasco, and the story had gone viral in our city's tight-knit social and legal circles. Daniel's firm, which had built its billion-dollar brand on projecting an image of family values and unimpeachable moral integrity, was in full-blown damage control. Having one of their senior partners publicly exposed for cheating on his wife with his pregnant secretary wasn't exactly on brand. That evening, I knew I had to face him one last time, on my own terms. I drove to the house. My house. His car was in the driveway. He must have used a spare key. He opened the door before I could even ring the bell, his face haggard, his expensive suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. Brittany, thank God, he started, his voice a desperate rasp as he reached for me. We need to talk. This has all been blown completely out of proportion. I sidestepped his touch and walked past him into the foyer. The house felt different. What had once been my sanctuary now felt like a crime scene. You're right, I said calmly, turning to face him. We do need to talk. I need you to pack your things and get out of my house. He stared at me, dumbfounded, a humorless laugh escaping his lips. Moved out? Brittany, be reasonable. This is my house, too. I almost laughed back in his face. The sheer, unmitigated gall. Actually, Daniel, it's not, I said, my voice soft but laced with steel. I suggest you check the deed. Check the mortgage statements. Check whose salary has been paying for this roof over your head for the last 5 years. You're a lawyer. Surely you understand the legal concept of separate property acquired through inheritance. The color drained from his face. The confident, arrogant man I had married vanished before my eyes, replaced by a pale, panicked stranger. He finally understood. The foundation of his entire life, the beautiful house, the successful wife, the comfortable lifestyle, wasn't his at all. It was mine. And I was taking it all back. My lawyer will be in touch with your lawyer to arrange a time for you to collect your personal belongings, I continued, my voice even. You have 24 hours. You can't do this, he whispered, his voice cracking. I can, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You taught me how. You showed me exactly how disposable a 5-year marriage can be. I turned and walked out the front door, leaving him standing alone in the ruins of the life he had so carelessly and arrogantly destroyed. I didn't look back. The days that followed were a masterclass in legal warfare, orchestrated by the brilliant Margaret Winters. Daniel, humbled and terrified, hired a lawyer of his own, but the man was clearly out of his depth. The initial blustering threats about fighting for his share of the marital home quickly evaporated after Margaret sent over a single, password-protected file, a preview of the evidence contained on the flash drive. His lawyer called me back within the hour, Margaret reported to me, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. The tone was considerably more cooperative. It seems Mr. Grant is suddenly very eager to settle this divorce as quietly and as quickly as possible. The reason for his newfound urgency became clear a day later. Apparently, Margaret explained, his mother, the formidable Mrs. Grant, finally learned the full extent of his financial deception and the dissipation of assets. She controls the family trust with an iron fist, and she is displeased. The Grant family doesn't air its dirty laundry, and Daniel just dumped the entire hamper on the front lawn of the city's legal community. The irony was exquisite. The woman who had publicly shamed me for my inability to produce an heir was now faced with a grandchild born of a sordid adultery scandal, and a son whose career and marriage were imploding in the most public and costly way imaginable. She wasn't angry at his betrayal of me, she was furious at his stupidity and the public shame he had brought upon the family name. We held all the cards, and Margaret played them with the skill of a grandmaster. She drew up the settlement agreement. It was less of a negotiation and more of a document of unconditional surrender. 1 week later, I sat in Margaret's office as Daniel signed the papers in a separate room down the hall. I didn't have to see him. The terms were brutal and absolute. He signed away any and all claims to the house, the vacation cabin, and our joint assets. He agreed to pay back every single cent he had spent on Lydia from our joint account, a figure that ran into the tens of thousands. He agreed to a generous spousal support package for 2 years, alimony calculated based on the luxurious lifestyle I had provided for him. And, in the final, satisfying twist of the knife, he agreed to pay my legal fees. All of them. The day the divorce was finalized by the court, I walked out of Margaret's office and into the bright afternoon sun. I should have felt triumphant, ecstatic. But instead, I just felt quiet. The war was over. I had won, decisively. But now I was left standing in the silence of the battlefield, and I had to figure out what to do with the hard-won peace. That night, I went back to the house. My house. I walked through the rooms, each one a ghost of a life I'd thought was mine. I stood in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom and felt a sharp pang of something, not sadness for him, but a deep, aching grief for the woman I had been. The woman who had tried so hard, who had believed so deeply in their shared future, who had blamed herself for every crack that appeared in their marriage. I mourned her that night. And then, I let her go. I spent the next month purging the house of every last trace of him. It was a cleansing ritual. His expensive, custom-made suits went to a charity that helps men get back on their feet for job interviews. His golf clubs were sold, and I donated the money to a women's shelter. The ridiculous, oversized leather recliner he loved so much was hauled out to the curb. The wedding portrait came down from the wall, and I shattered the glass in the frame before throwing it all in the trash. Room by room, I was reclaiming the space, and in doing so, I was reclaiming myself. But I knew I couldn't stay there forever. The house was a symbol of my victory, but it was also a mausoleum of dead dreams. I needed a new dream, one that was entirely my own. 3 months after that disastrous anniversary dinner, I walked into the office of my boss, Richard Santiago. I'd been on a leave of absence, and he greeted me with genuine warmth and concern. "Brittany," he said, studying my face. "You look different. Stronger." "I feel stronger, Richard," I replied, my voice steady. "And I have a proposition for you." I spread a thick portfolio out on his desk. For the past month, I hadn't just been cleaning my house, I'd been working, sometimes late into the night, fueled by coffee and a burning new sense of purpose. I'd been channeling all my anger, my pain, and my years of architectural skill into a new, audacious idea. "I'm leaving the firm to start my own," I announced. A boutique agency specializing in residential architecture for women who are starting over. Divorced women, widows, single mothers. Women who need a space that isn't just a house, but a sanctuary. A place to heal, to feel safe, and to become powerful. I had already spoken to Maya, my best friend and a brilliant interior designer in her own right. She was all in. We wanted to create a firm that didn't just design buildings, we wanted to help rebuild lives. We had a name, renovate and reclaim. Richard was impressed, I could see it in his eyes, but he was also a businessman. "That's a massive undertaking, Brittany. The capital, the clients, the risk." I have the capital, I said, thinking of the substantial settlement. And I already have our first 3 clients lined up. Women from my social circle who heard my story and reached out to me directly. They want what we're offering. They want a home designed by someone who gets it. By the end of the meeting, we had a deal. I wasn't leaving as a competitor, but as a strategic partner. His massive firm would refer clients who fit our unique niche, and we would collaborate on larger projects. It was a validation that meant more to me than any promotion ever could have. A year after that anniversary dinner, Maya and I stood on the sidewalk in front of a beautiful, renovated brownstone as a workman installed a polished brass sign on the door, "Renovate and Reclaim, Architecture for New Beginnings." We had poured everything we had, our money, our time, our hearts, into it. The work became my therapy. With every floor plan I drew for a divorced mother who needed a home office to launch her own business, or for a widow who wanted to transform her late husband's study into a bright, airy art studio, I felt like I was redesigning my own soul. The business took off faster than we could have ever imagined. Our story, my story, resonated in a way that no marketing campaign ever could. We weren't just architects, we were survivors who understood that a home was more than just walls and a roof. It was the foundation upon which a new life could be built. Through the city's relentless grapevine, I heard bits and pieces about Daniel. He'd been officially let go from his law firm a few months after the divorce, the scandal having made him a liability. He and Lydia were living in a small, rented apartment in the suburbs, struggling with the immense financial pressures of a new baby and a drastically diminished income. Mrs. Grant, furious about the public scandal and the hit to the family name, had reportedly cut him off completely from the Grant Trust Fund. The golden son, the heir apparent, had fallen spectacularly from grace. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No satisfaction, no pity. He was simply a ghost from a life I no longer lived, a footnote in a book I had long since finished writing. 5 years. That's how long it took to build an empire from the ashes of my old life. 5 years to the day from that humiliating anniversary dinner, I stood on a brightly lit stage in a midnight blue dress I'd designed myself, accepting the city's most prestigious award for architectural innovation. The award was for our firm's groundbreaking work on a pro bono project we'd spearheaded, a beautiful, secure, and empowering transitional housing facility for women escaping domestic abuse. The grand ballroom was packed. Our clients, our colleagues, journalists from design magazines. My parents and Carmen were in the front row, their faces shining with a pride that felt real and deeply earned. Maya stood beside me, my partner in every sense of the word. As I gave my speech, thanking the incredible women who had trusted us with their homes and their vulnerable stories, I felt a deep, quiet sense of fulfillment that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with purpose. After the ceremony, as I was mingling in the crowd, accepting congratulations, a figure near the back of the room caught my eye. It was him. Daniel. He was standing alone, looking out of place. He looked older, much older than his years, and heavier. The expensive, tailored suit was gone, replaced by something off the rack that didn't quite fit his shoulders. He looked ordinary. Small. Defeated. Our eyes met across the crowded, glittering room. He gave a small, hesitant wave. I gave a polite, brief nod and turned back to my conversation with the mayor. But later, as the evening was winding down and people were beginning to leave, he approached me near the exit. "Brittany," he said, his voice uncertain, almost shy. "Congratulations. It's really impressive. I saw the article about the shelter." "Thank you, Daniel," I replied, my voice even and calm. An uncomfortable silence hung between us for a long moment. "I wanted you to know," he finally stammered, looking down at his scuffed shoes, "I understand now. What I did. What I threw away. I was a fool. A complete and utter fool." I looked at this man who had once been the center of my entire universe, the man whose approval I had craved, whose betrayal had nearly broken me. And I felt a distant, clinical sympathy, the kind one might feel for a stranger who has made a series of very poor life choices. "I'm glad you've found some perspective, Daniel," I said. I hope it helps you. Lydia and I. He trailed off, shaking his head with a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. It's not what I thought it would be. She's not, well, she's not you. No, she's not, I said simply. And I'm not the woman I was when we were married. That woman died 5 years ago in a restaurant called La Bernardine. His face crumpled, the truth of my words hitting him with a force he could no longer deny. I made the biggest mistake of my life, he whispered, his eyes pleading with me, searching for some sign of the woman he had lost. Losing you. For a moment, I considered all the sharp, cutting things I could say to him, the final twists of the knife. But looking at him, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure. Just a profound and peaceful finality. You didn't lose me, Daniel, I said, and my voice was gentle, not for his sake, but for mine. You made a choice. And that choice, as painful and destructive as it was, led both of us exactly where we needed to be. I could never have become this person, I gestured around at the grand ballroom, at the evidence of my new life, if I had stayed in that marriage, trying to be the woman you and your mother wanted me to be. So, in a strange way, you gave me a gift. You didn't give me a child, but you gave me back to myself. I saw the last flicker of hope in his eyes die, replaced by a final, bleak understanding. He had come here looking for absolution, or perhaps a second chance, and had found neither. Take care of yourself, Daniel, I said. And take care of your son. He deserves the best version of you that you can be. I turned and walked away, joining Maya, who was waiting for me by the door, a warm smile on her face. I didn't look back. In the car, driving through the glittering city lights, past the buildings I had helped design, toward the home I had created for myself, Maya asked, "How do you feel?" I thought about the broken, humiliated woman who had stumbled out of that restaurant 5 years ago. I thought about the rage, the meticulous planning, the hard work, the tears, the healing. I thought about the life I had designed, board by board, brick by brick, from the ground up, on my own terms. Free, I said finally, a real smile touching my lips. I feel completely and utterly free. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy journey, but I hope it can give someone out there who is feeling broken the strength they need to start their own renovation. What's the bravest step you've ever taken to reclaim your own life and your own happiness? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more tales of survival and new beginnings.